Hi, Nick here from Greenspace Zambia with another of our My Greenspace videos. And today I'm going to talk about 6 very easy to care for indoor plants. So I think I'll start and go clockwise. So first up, we've got Syngonium podophyllum, the arrowhead vine. This one is quite a forgiving plant in terms of requiring bright but indirect light, somewhere close to a window but not where it's going to get any direct sun. Water-wise, it is not too demanding, watering once a week or so, depending on the season. And we'll continually put up these nice kind of shoots with these bright green, mostly variegated leaves. There are a few different varieties of that. And you can get ones that have kind of a pink variegation through to this white and even solid green. As the name suggests, vine, it does produce long vining type stems that will root at the nodes. But here, what we've done in terms of this plant here is to cut back those stems on a regular basis and essentially form the plant into a much more shrubby, slightly upright plant, more so than anything else. It is not too demanding and will constantly give you that kind of nice green shot of color. If you want to keep it as a vine, you can do that and train it around a trellis, or in some cases people actually even allow it to climb walls or things like that, or even if you put a moss pole, it can climb up there and give you a taller plant. Next we'll move on to the ZZ plant here. This is Zameocolcus xamifolia. This plant is actually indigenous to East Africa. It is a member of the aroid family, Araceae, and it produces these fantastic architectural upright stems with the leaves kind of shooting out on either side of that. This is a succulent plant. The stems and the leaves are quite kind of succulent feeling, and it grows from a tuber underground that will then also store water. This one is very tolerant of being left to dry out for quite a bit, and in some cases we might not even water this except once a month. It is also very tolerant in terms of light conditions, where it can take all the way from close to the window where it's going to get a bit of direct sun through to actually very dark areas. Not pitch black by any means, but areas that don't receive anywhere close to bright light effectively. It will grow much slower in those locations and hence doesn't need to be watered as much. But if you have a dark corner and you still want to plant in there, this is one of the better ones to go in that space. Next we have another Araceae family member, or aroid. This is Spathiphylum. These have white flowers that they will produce and usually can come in variety of sizes. This is a dwarfer type that might get to about 30 centimeters tall, with smaller, narrower leaves and a shorter inflorescence. The inflorescence will shoot up and stand, maybe another 20 or so centimeters above the foliage. These are clumping plants, and at the base, they produce quite a number of shoots, and over time, will actually fill this container, and then this pot would need to be divided. These do prefer more water than its cousin, the ZZ plant, requiring watering about once a week. Anything more than that, especially at certain times of year like during cold weather, you have the greater chance of rotting the root system. And when that happens, the whole plant might die, or you'd have to then rehabilitate the plant and get that crown re-rooted before it would grow anymore. These are fairly tolerant when it comes to light settings as well. They don't want any direct sun, so indirect or reflected light near a window, but not really in the window's path, or even somewhere where it's a little bit further away from a window or any kind of light source like that will do for this guy here. Next, we have one of the cultivars of the sword fern. This is a Nephrolepis species. Ferns are fairly forgiving in many cases. Not all ferns by any means, but the Nephrolepis, the sword fern, is. It can take lower light conditions, but not as dark as something like the ZZ plant. It still needs a fairly bright, indirect light source. This is also a fern that would prefer to kind of dry out a bit in between waterings. It doesn't want to sit in water. If it does, again, you'll have a chance of the roots starting to rot, and that will set the plant back. It won't necessarily kill it, especially if you catch it early on, but what you'll find is that a lot of these little leaflets from the fern start to go brown and fall off, and you might even have patches there then start to die. So a brightly lit location, watering about once a week usually is sufficient. When we hit the colder weather, watering once every 2 weeks or so will usually be sufficient for this plant. There are a few different cultivars, including one that has more bright yellowish green leaves, and that one would require a little bit more light than some of the darker green leafed varieties. But still worth growing because it actually brightens up the area that you put it in, so it's quite nice. Moving on, we have the spider plant, so named because the stems, when they finished flowering, start to produce these little plantlets that can then be rooted. You can actually see here that we've got roots that have been forming on this, so this could be planted up and start a brand new plant. This is Chlorophytum comosum, one of the variegated cultivars that have been selected for it. It has this kind of nice mounding, arching foliage, and very useful if put on a bookshelf or somewhere high up, even as a hanging plant indoors, where then you can actually enjoy the hanging nature of the little plantlets at the ends of the flower stems. It has quite thick tuberish kind of roots. They are specifically for the storage of water. So it can deal with fairly droughty conditions, but the longer it stays that way, the more the leaf will actually suffer and the actual appearance of the plant starts to go downhill. So maintaining a regular watering of the spider plant is essential to keeping it looking fantastic and to keep the pendulous little plantlets flowing as well. Nice large specimens, especially if displayed in a hanging basket, can have this fantastic kind of look as almost the first tier of the main plant, and then a second tier as all of these little plantlets start to grow. In terms of light, it would prefer a bright location, not necessarily direct sun, but if it gets a bit of direct sun, it's not gonna burn the leaves too badly. But a bright location where it's getting reflected light will keep this then looking its best. Finally, then we have got Sansavaria. This is another one of those plants that is quite adaptable. It can deal with lower light conditions, although in lower light conditions, depending on the cultivar you have, it might actually end up going to a darker green color in terms of the leaves. This one I believe is called Moonlight. It has more kind of grayish green or whitish green leaves. These guys are fairly tolerant of lower water requirements. Indoors, we would normally water this once every 2 weeks, once every month, depending on the time of year and the needs of the plant. Again, with all of these plants, you can easily kind of check the water status in the soil by just poking your finger into the root ball. For all of these, if you hit about 3 centimeters down and the soil is dry at that stage, it's time to water. Some of these, like the Spathiphylum, the Syngonium, and the spider plant here, will all let you know beforehand that they need water, as they will start to wilt a little bit and look a little sad. The ZZ plant and the Sansavaria won't really change in terms of their look, even if they're at that stage of really requiring water. The fern will start to get yellowish leaves, especially around the base, as the plant starts to shed some of its leaflets in order to keep the rest of the plant alive. That said, all of these are very easy to grow, not demanding too much in terms of attention for the most part. Fertilizing, during the active growing period, which usually ranges from about September, October through to about February, March. I only do a half-strength fertilizer for these, watering with fertilizing with the water every second watering during that time of year. Other than that, they are usually no problems in terms of pests or diseases. One of the biggest, as I say, is just overwatering if that's going to be the case. But as long as you kind of stick to that, golden rule of once a week, you're going to be fine. Just be a little bit more mindful during the colder times of year between April to July. That once a week might be too much at that stage. But by the time the heat comes on, once a week will be sufficient. In some cases, you might actually have to water a little bit more than that, especially in extreme heat conditions that we get sometimes here in Zambia. But I hope you have enjoyed this video. If you have any suggestions or kind of comments about any of the plants we have shown here, do let us know in the comment section below, and we'll see you next time. Cheers.